Hey guys, this is Tim with Little Crow Gunworks. Welcome back to the channel. Well, today is the day. We're finally going to get into the actual hand loading portion of this hand loading series. Today we are going to talk powder selection. Oh boy. This video is going to be long. I'm going to probably break it up into multiple videos so they're in more digestible sizes, and probably release them all on the same day so you guys can binge watch them if you want, but I don't want to do it in one long video because then the retention is usually not good and it's hard for you to keep your place and whatever. So I thought about what else to put in this video, and if I wanted to add anything about testing or any of that stuff, but I think this subject is so important that I want it to just be about powder selection because I think it deserves all the time I'm going to give it. And after this series of whatever videos about powder, however many I break them up into, then we'll go into, okay, now you know how to pick the best powders. Now what do we do? Like, where do we go from here? So I don't want to get distracted and derail in anything other than powder selection in this video. First, I'd like to say thank you to you guys for all your continued support. The positivity is just really overwhelming. Some of you guys saw, we blew past 10,000 subscribers. We're currently at 10,330. We have, we have part 3 coming out in about 2 hours, so I gotta try to be done by then. And so far, the likes versus dislikes is still 99% to 1%. It's going really well. Turns out there's a real thirst for this knowledge, and people are really desperate to get good information and try to get their things shooting better. So that's good. This video might be the most contentious one of the whole series, just because I'm going to draw some very harsh lines in the sand based on my 28 years of experience. I'm going to reserve the right to make the cuts on what powders are viable and which ones are not. And it's going to ruffle some feathers, but that's kind of a too bad, so sad situation. A lot of you guys have been asking for my process, and that gives me the right to make the cuts. So we're just going to have to deal with it and move on. Hopefully you'll keep an open mind and try to see what you can learn from this and apply it to your testing. So before we get into this, I'm going to say that this is going to be the most helpful video on the internet for powder selection. I'm fine setting the bar that high because I believe it. I think it's going to be the most helpful and save you guys the most time and money and on and on. But it's going to be long, so I'm going to try to do it without any notes or breaks or edits or anything. So we'll see how that goes. All right, let's get the screen recording fired up here. 3, 2, 1, and we're live. Okay, so remember our Pareto distribution here. And I said in the intro video that I believe powder selection is second most important out of anything. Why do I say that? Well, I've had rifles in the past where I've had a polished load set up for them, and the guns, let's say it shoots 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, 3-shot groups at 100 yards on average. Reliably, like no matter when I take it out, it shoots up to about 3/8 and anywhere underneath that. And then I've experimented with new powders and going, okay, I have a polished gun that I know shoots and it's a known quantity. Let me try this other powder. And it goes from shooting 3/8 or 1/4 inch groups at 100 yards to 6.5 inch groups just with a powder change, which is a factor of the groups getting 26 times bigger. You're not going to get that much variation with a bullet change. If you try a bullet and it's shooting 6.5 inch groups, you're not going to change the bullet and get it down to 1/4 inch groups without any other changes. That's not going to happen. So because you get such a drastic change with powder change, that's why I have it ranked above bullet selection. And some guys have commented that if you put, exposed base FMJs in something, you can get it to shoot pretty bad, but this is about precision, so you wouldn't select that bullet intentionally. Where powder, you don't know what you don't know, so you're going to be experimenting with different powders, You're going to be picking the best bullet for the job that you think is the right one, but you're going to be experimenting with different powders, and you're going to see drastic variations in group size just by switching powder. So I think it is second most important on this list. So I think what I want to do is spend a little bit of time talking about reloading manuals, and it's going to be very brief because, again, this series is about the way I do things, and I use Gordon's reloading tool for everything. I don't start a load without using that. So if you guys are bound to reloading manuals or reloading data that you can find on the internet because you don't have a PC and can't use Gordon's reloading tool, I'm sorry, but this is the way I do things, and I'm not going to change it for those of you that don't have a computer. What I can tell you, though, is for reloading manuals, if you're going to use one, I think the load data that's available out there for free that is the most helpful is Nosler's load data that they post online or in their manuals. Why do I say that? Well, because it's the most thorough. Most load data you're going to find doesn't always have the load density for the different powders that you're using, which I think is very valuable information. They don't always have the specific tested cartridge overall length for each bullet that they test. I don't think anybody lists the water capacity of their cases except for Nosler. And then they'll usually tell you, like in their testing, what was the most accurate charge weight with each powder, as marked by this little asterisk, and then they'll also tell you what their most accurate powder they tested was too. And most sources don't give you that information. So I feel like Nosler's is the most thorough, and if you're bound to publish data, that's what you should try to use if you can, if they have data for the cartridge and bullet weight you're trying to use. It's not necessarily the bullet you're going to be using, but the bullet weight. It's a good point of reference. And what I think is really valuable about this is that they give you the load density, as I already mentioned. And in my experience, for peak precision, consistency, reliability, unfussiness, performance, overall just forgiving load, which is what we're after. We're after forgiveness. And I'm going to beat that to death as we go along here. In order to get that, you want the load density that you're operating in to be in the 90 to like 102, 103, 104% neighborhood. You can go into the 80s if you want to, but generally if you're loading something in the 80s, you're leaving a little velocity on the table, which this series isn't about velocity, it's about precision. So that's not the end of the world, but in my experience, when you have a nice full case and the powder is kissing, the bullet bottom of the bullet is kissing the powder or barely slightly compressing it, that seems to be where things are most happy. And if you're in the 80% range, you're not going to be touching the powder with the bottom of the bullet. You're going to have airspace in the case. And things can still shoot well that way, but just know that you could get more velocity out of it, and you could get a better fill ratio with slower burning powders. So that's what I recommend, and you'll see for their load data, I'm going to go into the powders that I recommend, and you'll be able to source with Nosler's data and go, okay, here's a few powders that Tim was recommending. What category of powders does that fit into, and what are some other powders that are similar that I can try to find load data using for what I'm doing? And really, I think that's about the extent of what I'm going to say about published data. A lot of reloading manuals, most people don't spend money on them anymore, but a lot of them have information in the front of the book about how to assemble ammo. That's not necessarily an optimal way to assemble it for anything. Just if you follow the directions and put it together, it's going to go bang more times than not. But the data in those manuals or information on how to assemble cartridges isn't necessarily the optimal way to assemble it for any given discipline, like whatever you're trying to achieve. So now I think we're going to go into Gordon's reloading tool and kind of walk through, maybe we should talk about powder before we do that so you guys know how I pick these things and why. Let's pull up the burn rate chart. So this is a full burn rate chart from Hodgdon. I've got that right finally. I usually say Hornady just out of reflex, even though it's Hodgdon's burn rate chart. Yay. So this is their full burn rate chart. Now, I'm a one-trick pony. I know an unhealthy amount about rifle cartridges and long-range shooting and how to make things shoot small and on and on. I don't know anything about ARs. I don't even own one. I don't know anything about subsonic loads. I don't know anything about shotguns or pistols or any of that. I know this, what you're about to learn in this series. I know it inside out and backwards. So because of that, that's what I'm going to be focusing on. So of all the powders on this list, a lot of them are pistol and shotgun powders and that sort of thing. The rifle powders start, for the rifle cartridges that I know how to make shoot well, they start around number 73 here, Accurate LT30. So we're only going to be looking at powders from Accurate LT30, again number 73, through this whole second column, into the start of this third column, and all the way down to the end. These are like 50 BMG powders down here. So that said, that's 103 powders to get from 73 to 176. That's a lot. Daunting, intimidating, right? Especially if you're new. Like, where the hell do I start? Well, I'm going to reserve the right to make the cuts. Here we go. Cut number 1. We're going to eliminate all of the Alliant powders. Why is that? Well, I have it on good authority from a source that I trust. John, I know you're going to see this. John and I visited the other day, and he informed me that Alliant Powder, as most of you know, stopped shipping powder to retailers last year, or any of the usual suspects that you could order Alliant Powder from, Graf & Sons, Powder Valley, on and on. And that is their intent for 2025. They're going to continue to not make it available for you guys. So the best advice I can give you is move on. Burn up the Alliant powder you have and move on to something else. Don't plan on it coming back. It may never come back, and even if it does, you're not their priority. So why would you support them? This is common sense stuff to me. And if you're not sure where to turn and you want to turn to one other line and you don't want to have a whole bunch of different lines, I suggest Vidavori. I think it's better anyways. And now, with the way prices are, Vidavori is also one of the cheapest options. And I think it's the best. And they have the most diverse lineup, evenly spread across the burn rate chart. So no matter what you're shooting, you're going to be able to find a Vidavori powder that's a perfect burn rate for whatever cartridge, high velocity rifle cartridge you're shooting. So just move on, guys. Screw Alliant, get something else. There's a bunch of other lines like Shooter's World powders. I'm not using any of those. They're not on here. We're eliminating those. Norma powders. We're eliminating those. What else? Ball powder. This is going to ruffle feathers, but it is what it is. We're eliminating all of the ball powder. Because when it comes to precision, anybody who's serious about their precision and spends a lot of money competing across the country and across the world, nobody's using ball powder because extruded powder is more consistent. It's just better overall. And this series is about precision hand loading, and nothing about ball powder to me screams precision. So we're eliminating all of them, regardless of the brand. So with those big haircuts, going from 73 all the way to 176, I was able to groom this list from 103 powders down to 36. And these are the only 36 powders that I would use if I care about precision, regardless of what the cartridge is, from like a 204 Ruger all the way up to 50 BMG. Drum roll. All right, here's Tim's list of viable powders, going from fastest down to slowest. And what I did here was color coordinate these things. For those of you that are colorblind, I'm sorry, I don't know how else to differentiate it. But maybe I could change the font, I guess. But anyway, the reason I color coded these is because I clustered them based on powders that are most similar to each other and powders that would be viable in the same scenarios. So like if you find low data for Accurate 2015 BR, but you can't find accurate 2015 BR, but your cartridge, there's load data for it, these other powders in orange would be good substitutes that would have similar burn rate characteristics, produce similar velocities, have similar fill ratios, and produce similar results. So I try to cluster these for you guys, so that way it's not just a big blur of numbers and letters that don't make any sense, especially if this is fairly new to you. So the fastest burning stuff is going to be for your cases that are not overbore, like some of your borderline straight wall cases, like the big elephant killing stuff. And then these are going to be like your bench rest cartridge powders and small caliber stuff. This is going to be a very diverse, the gray is going to be a very diverse group of powders. This would be ideal for like your medium bullet weight to high bullet weight 223 stuff. Most of your 308 bullet weights, lightweight bullet weights for like 7mm08, things like that. And then when you get into the screen stuff, this is going to be your getting into your higher performance, higher velocity cartridges. And by the time you get down to the bottom here, these are BMG powders. Most of your Magnum powders are in the teal and lavender, purple, whatever that is here. So I guess the best advice I can give you is that if you're not sure where to turn and you have your cartridge, you have your bullet weight, and you don't know what to start with, go into published load data, either in a manual or online, and see what these companies are recommending for powders for your particular cartridge and bullet weight, and then reference my list here. Take a screenshot of it with your phone or whatever, so you can reference it and go, pause the video and take a screenshot and go, okay, here I could find data for whatever, H1000, but I can't find H1000. What are some good substitutes, or whatever your powder is? Find a good substitute, and that'll kind of give you a good idea where to be. And the reason this is important is that when you look at published data in general, what they'll give you is too diverse. So for any given combination, they might give you a powder that's anywhere from the green all the way to the purple. For, let's say, like a 7 rem mag with a 160 grain bullet, you might find load data for any one of these powders: green, blue, purple. Well, in general, you want to look at what they're offering you, and you probably want to pick something that's in the middle, according to my list, to get optimal results. These purple ones in that example would give the highest velocity, but they might be fussy because they might not be burning all the way. The ones in the middle are pretty optimal, and then the faster burning ones that they give you may have subpar or suboptimal fill ratios and leave some velocity on the table that could be achieved. So I think what we'll do next is go into, now that I've ruffled feathers with the powder choices, and I guess I can't stress this enough. If I'm shooting, if my goal is precision, and even if it's not my peak goal, like no matter what I'm doing, no matter the cartridge, these are the only 36 powders I'm choosing from. If I owned an AR and I wanted to make high volume blasting ammo, I'd use a ball powder, because then precision is not the priority, and ball powder is a little bit cheaper per pound, and it meters really easily, and you don't have to worry about getting perfect charge weights and on and on. So ball powder has its use, but if I'm doing anything I care about the group size, I'm picking one of these 36 powders, period, no matter what. So if you're using ball powder for something and it's working for you, great, keep using it. But if you're starting from scratch and you're not sure what to use, you're going to make your life a lot easier if you pick from this list. In my experience, all these powders can shoot extremely small and be consistent and reliable and unfussy and whatever. So, all right, I think we'll go into Gordon's now. So I have this open in expert mode. I'm not going to do a tutorial on how to download GRT. I'm not going to do a full tutorial on every single feature of GRT. That's not what this is. This is assuming that you guys are willing to do what it takes to get your stuff to shoot small consistently, and you're willing to figure out how to get access to the program, and you're willing to do whatever it takes, right? So this is going to be basically just showing you how to select optimal powders and what to look for and that sort of thing, and how to manipulate the program as best you can to try to get a good idea of where to start. And then we will be coming back to Gordon's as we go through the series for different reasons, so I can show you guys things and reference things, and they'll be good learning opportunities to come back to this. But for now, in an effort to make this video not 10 hours, we're just going to focus on powder selection. And then I'm going to show you like what optimal powders should look like, and then what I see online so frequently where people are using, in my opinion, suboptimal powders in an effort, usually in an effort to chase velocity, to chase an extra 50 feet per second, which is stupid. That in the big scheme of things, that doesn't matter at all. The consistent load will always outperform the faster, hot-rodded, suboptimal like load if you're using the wrong powder across time. What else? I don't think there's anything else I needed to address before we dive into this. No, I don't. And again, I don't have any notes, so I think we'll just get going. We'll go ahead and start by populating our cartridge that we're using for this series, 308 Winchester. And you guys that aren't using a 308, just do the steps in order, right? So whatever steps I walk you through here, just do it in the same order for whatever your cartridge is. So pull up 308 Winchestershire, get that put in. Now, whenever you put a cartridge in, it's going to populate this upper corner with whatever generic data is input in the system for that cartridge. It's not necessarily optimal, nor should you always just assume that it's what you want it to be and leave it. The things I would leave are the barrel grooves. So starting at the top, barrel grooves, I'd leave that alone. This cartridge, it looks like I think this is the SAMI pressure, or maybe it's just what they have put in the system. They have 60,191 PSI. If you have a modern gun, modern components, that sort of thing, everything's in good working order. A realistic safe maximum is probably more like 65,000 PSI. For this series, I didn't want to go that high because of our brass choice with the PMC brass. I didn't think it would put up with 65,000 PSI. And frankly, with a 308, the difference between 62 and 65,000 PSI really isn't that much velocity. No matter what you do, it's not going to be a hot rod, so why stomp on it and just ruin brass for no reason? So I decided to set our artificial ceiling at 62,000 PSI. So you can change that number, and when you do, it just bumps up this purple kind of no-go zone. It bumps up that bar to 62,000 PSI. Case length is important to input because that affects the amount of drag and friction, and it does affect the pressure somewhat. So just make sure you have an accurate case length, like whatever you trim your cases to, make sure you put that in there. Case volume, it's going to start with a generic number. I recommend that you harvest your own case volume to put in here to get the most accurate predictions. I think this is very underestimated, underrated, undervalued, whatever you want to say. I don't think people give this enough credit. And this single issue, the case volume, is why I kind of view published loading data, like in manuals and online, as quasi-useless information. Just because you don't know the case volume of the case they were using, so whatever their max is, like if your case capacity is a grain higher or a grain lower than the case capacity they used, that can change the pressure, the max pressure, by like 3,000 PSI one way or the other. So I just said I don't want to run at 65, I want to run at 62. Well, just having the case capacity wrong by 1 grain is going to put me up where I don't want to be and start wrecking brass and whatever. So this is super important, and it's not something you're going to be able to reverse engineer with published load data, which is why you kind of have to start low and work your way up and watch for pressure signs. And it's also why I think a lot of times the published listed max charge weight isn't usually the max. It's usually too low or too high because, again, your case volume is different than whatever they used. So I recommend harvesting your own case volume. You can do that simply by just loading up some generic data that you find in a manual or whatever. Maybe go 1.5 grains or so under whatever the listed max is. Just load up 3 charges at whatever they recommend for cartridge overall length, or whatever fits in your magazine, or whatever, you know, is close to the rifling for you but not jamming, and go out and shoot them. And Then you have fired brass, which is what the program wants. It wants fired water capacity. So then you can come home, and I did a little video on this, but for those of you that don't know how to measure water capacity, I'll probably roll the video and just talk over it here. You want to take your 3 different cases and label them A, B, and C, or however many you decide to fire. And then you want to weigh each one empty. So you weigh A empty, write down the weight, B, C, and so on. Then after you have the empty weights, you want to fill them up with water and have the water be a little bit proud of the top of the case mouth, and then you want to use a razor blade to cut the droplet of water off flush with the top of the case. You want it perfectly flush, not a little dip and not a hump. So cut it off perfectly flush and then weigh it again. So you're weighing it full of water and you're weighing it empty, and the difference is the case capacity, this case volume. That's how you get that number. So what I would do is do 3 to 5 cases and then take the average. Just add up all the case capacities, divide by how many you had, get your average, and put that in there. And that's going to give you the best data with all of these predictions and give you the best idea of where you're going to land and what powders are going to be best for you, and on and on. So before you really get into the ladder tests or any significant testing, I recommend doing that. Just load up a handful of charges a little bit below a published max. And it doesn't matter what powder you use. You can use some powder you're trying to get rid of or whatever, just something you can find load data for. Load, maybe 1.5 grams under max, and go out and shoot them. So then when you have that data for this project, our case capacity was not 56.3 grains, it was actually 55.1, which means that PMC brass is thicker than whatever the standard was they used for this, which is going to increase the pressure. So it's important to know. Cartridge overall length. We talked about in the equipment video how to harvest your cartridge overall length and figure out where your rifling is. I do recommend those Hornady tools. I think it's the most accurate way to measure it. If the rifle's already assembled, if the barrel's off, there's a better way to measure it, but most of you are not going to be in that situation. If you decide to measure where your rifling is by some other means, by either soft seating bullets or jamming or slitting a case neck or whatever, you can do that. If you get weird results, that's kind of on you. I'm recommending the Hornady tools. I think it's the best way to do it. The tools are not that expensive. That's what I suggest. So in this instance, I usually start every bullet, no matter what it is, I usually start it at 7 thousandths jump, 0.007, right up close to the rifling. I don't like jamming for basically anything. If you start closer than 7, you can get weird results. So like 5 thousandths from touch to 5 thousandths jam, that kind of 10 thousandths window, we kind of call that no man's land. You don't really want to load anything there because it's going to be erratic. The bench rest guys will tell you that. Anybody that's really experienced with this will tell you that. Getting right up to it or just jamming in is like the no-fly zone. You want to be at least 5 off or at least 5 in to get it consistent, just due to, inconsistencies in the bullet. Like if you measure it with one bullet, that doesn't mean every bullet has that exact perfect same nose profile and ogive profile. So it's better to be in a little ways or out. So I usually start everything at 7 thousandths jump. In this case, I started at 20 thousandths jump. I don't know why, but that's what I did. And in our case, the cartridge overall length was 2.820, not 2.800. The Siebert factor I never change. Our barrel length was 26 inches. Our rifle weight was 13.25 pounds. That is really only relevant because when you do these simulations, it'll give you recoil energy, and that's heavily influenced by rifle weight. So it's a good thing to put in there. Our twist was a 12 twist. Gas leakage I never change. And bullet jump I do. So you have to check this read and understood caution warning thing and then unlock it. Once it's unlocked, you can input your bullet jump, which was 20 thousandths. So you see this, the value of this program is that it can give you a good idea of what powders to use, but the information is only as good as the inputs. It's that old garbage in, garbage out. If your inputs are shitty, your predictions are going to be shitty. So you have to make sure you have as good inputs as you possibly can over here to get the best data out of the program. And whatever it gives you, that doesn't mean it's like solid gold data. It's just, it's as good as you can make the program simulate these things, but then you still have to be careful and you still have to go out and test and shoot the stuff. It's not like a guarantee for it to lead you to, you know, the best load right away. You still have to go out and test the stuff and be careful, and like, don't just run it up to max and shoot it willy-nilly. You still got to be checking for pressure and on and on. So I just want to make sure my screen recording was still going here. So then we want to pick a bullet. For this series, we picked the Sierra 175 grain Match King. I'll confess, I actually wanted to use the Hornady 180 grain SST because I had a bunch and they're obsolete to me. I'm not going to use them anymore, and I had 300 of them to get rid of, but that bullet requires a 10 twist, or at least tighter than 12, especially because I was going to be shooting it basically in the winter when it's really cold, and I didn't have adequate twist for it, so I had to substitute for the Sierra Match King. I didn't want to use a match bullet, but that's what else I had 300 plus of laying around, so that's what I did. But I wanted to use the SST. So we'll go to 308 caliber bullets, 175 hollow point boat tail Match King. We'll get that in. So when you populate the bullet, that is going to seat the bullet in the theoretical case based on the cartridge overall length over here. So whatever you have here for cartridge overall length, it's going to use that information to determine how far the bullet is seated in the case, which also affects the effective case volume here. You see under the cartridge overall length, under here is the effective case volume. That's how much combustion space is left after the bullet is stuck in the case. So we started with 55.1, but seating this bullet at 2.820 brought it from 55.1 down to 47.15. And I'm pretty sure that number, that effective case volume, is what Nosler puts on their load data. I don't think it's the empty case volume. I think it's the effective case volume based on the bullet and the seating depth that they recommended. So that's important information. And then over here you'll see the seating depth. So right now the seating depth is 0.4627. That's how much bullet. I don't have a big bullet here. I just have a little teeny one, but that's how much from the base of the bullet up the bullet. That's how much is stuck in the brass. And you'll notice that if you change the cartridge overall length, that seating depth then changes, and so does the effective case volume, or effective combustion space. So we'll go back to 2.82, so that you see this is all important. All these things have to be checked and figured out and accounted for to get the best results. So now we're going to start playing with powder. And before we do that, we want to say, okay, what is the, when I start my testing, what is the average temperature going to be when I go out and test? And you have a good idea of when you're going to be able to get to the range. Just look at approximately what time you're going to be there and what temperature they're projecting, and put that in here, because that does affect how things burn. And we're going to pound this home too in the series. Like, that really matters. And a lot of you that have loads that are fussy or seem to derail on you, or they were shooting great and now they fell apart and whatever, and you can't figure out why, a lot of times it's because the load that you picked was super sensitive and it only shot good under those conditions, and now you're shooting and it's 15 degrees colder or 15 degrees warmer or 20 or 30 or whatever, and now you effectively, because the temperature, changing the temperature changes the pressure curve, and it changes the PSI of the load and the velocity. So now you may have fell out of where that little teeny sweet spot was that you had, and now it doesn't shoot anymore. So what I'm going to teach you guys in this series is how to find big, fat, wide, forgiving nodes that are going to shoot from below 0 to 100 degrees. So you're not doing this. You're not having this situation where it's super fussy, because I think that derails more people and causes more frustration than anything else. Is you do all the work, you spend the time, you get something that shoots, and then it falls apart on you. Like, talk about how frustrating is that when you worked so hard to get something and then it just goes to shit on you and you don't know why. Well, it's because you picked something that was too fussy. So I'm going to teach you guys how to not do that throughout the different tests that I conduct. Not in here, not on Gordon's. I'm not going to show you that, how to find it. You have to actually go out and shoot and test to find it. But then once you find a forgiving window, you can come back into Gordon's and go, okay, I found this big window. How forgiving is it? You can play with temperature and figure that out. And I'll show you all that as we go along. Not in this video, but in the series. All right, so I guess we can just start with, go back to our powders here. So for 308 with 175, 168 grain bullets, our powders are going to be the gray ones here. H4895. These are your optimal powders, and we'll kind of walk through them just to show you what I'm looking for. We'll start with the powder we ended up using, which is IMR 4895. So we'll input